Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here, and it's time for more Fate Grand Order lore. My $50 patron, Chaos Sonic 1, recently asked me to cover the game's collaboration events. For my own sanity, I've narrowed that prompt down to the following 6 chapters: The Garden of Order, Fate Accel Zero Order, Prisma Causeway, Apocrypha Inheritance of Glory, Lady Reines Case Files, and Fate Requiem Board Games of the Apocalypse. These are all collaborations between Fate Grand Order and other Type Moon works. We've got a ton to cover, so let's just jump right on in. The Garden of Order is a collaboration with Kata no Kyokai, or the Garden of Sinners. It tells the story of Ryogi Shiki, the heiress to a family of demon hunters. She's arguably one of the strongest characters in the Nasuverse. Believing a person can only truly master one skill at a time, Shiki's family has its heirs develop multiple personalities. Beyond that, Shiki was even more special, born with the origin of void. Basically, it means her true nature is a direct link to the root of all existence. Most of the time, though, that side of herself lies dormant, leaving control of the body to her other personas, one male, one female. I've got separate lore videos for Shiki herself and Kata no Kyokai in general, so do check those out for more details. Long story short, Shiki's male persona had a murderous impulse, and to stop herself from killing her crush, Mikia Kokuto, she threw herself in front of a speeding car. The accident killed Shiki's male half, and she woke up with a new power, the mystic eyes of death perception. She can see the end of all things as a network of death lines. By cutting these lines, she can bring an end to people, animals, and even obscure concepts. The mage Toko Aozaki taught her to control these eyes, and in return, Shiki works for Toko dealing with supernatural incidents. One of these incidents happens to involve the Ogawa apartment complex, a building made by another mage, Soren Araya, to reach the root by channeling yin and yang while repeating the final days of the complex's tenants. Originally, Shiki was able to destroy this building along with Araya. However, in FGO's timeline, all of Shiki's accomplishments, her entire life, are incinerated by Gaetia during the first major arc of the story. Gaetia preserves the incineration of humanity with holy grails implanted at singularities distributed across time. Taking interest in the Ogawa apartment case, Gaetia chose to recover the building and fashion it into a singularity. Gaetia then put Edmond Dantes in charge of it. Dantes is the central character of the Count of Monte Cristo. On the day of his wedding to the beautiful Mercedes, he was framed for supporting Napoleon Bonaparte and imprisoned within the fortress Chateau d'If. There, he spent 5 years learning magecraft and survival skills from his mentor, Abe Faria. After Faria's death, Dantes escaped the prison and went on to find the treasure of Monte Cristo Island. With wealth and power, Dantes set out to take revenge on the bastards who stole away his beloved. Thus, he is both an embodiment of vengeance itself and a notorious escape artist capable of breaking out of any imprisonment. He was summoned as an Avenger servant and tasked with maintaining the Ogawa singularity. Rather than directly follow Gaetia's orders, though, Dantes opted to use the Ogawa apartments to create his own personal hellscape. The dude's still mad for revenge. Basically, he'd lure in servants from Chaldea, and the apartment complex would bring out their suppressed resentment. A great deal of heroic spirits resent the circumstances of their deaths, after all. This, in turn, attracted more deceased spirits, further strengthening the singularity. To assist with gathering Chaldea's servants, Edmond Dantes relied on Mephistopheles, whom Gaetia also summoned. I covered this creepy ass all the way back in London, so I'll take the liberty of skipping his backstory. The important thing here is that, when summoned, he decided to split himself into good and evil halves. His evil half infiltrated Chaldea to gather servants, while his good half remains in the apartment complex waiting to help Chaldea. Of course, the best help we receive is from Shiki herself. When human history was being incinerated by Gaetia, she survived, or rather her mind did, by entering a dreamlike state. Due to her connection to the Ogawa apartment complex in life, she winds up summoned to it as an assassin servant. This is Shiki in her female persona, which tries to compensate for the missing male half by being a bit of a tomboy edgelord. While she boasts of her lust for murder, she really only kills bad guys. On occasion, her dormant personality emerges, the one with a connection to the root. We call this Void Shiki, and in FGO, she manifests as a Saber-class servant. Whenever this happens, she's only around for a brief while before tripping over something and returning to normal. Assassin Shiki isn't even aware this keeps happening throughout the event. As far as what happens, Chaldea sends Ritsuka and Mashu to investigate the singularity. We help Shiki kill some ghosts, and team up to ascend the tower. Shiki wants to clear out all the spirits before they seep out into the neighborhood. In the different apartments, we run across various resentful servants and kick their asses to keep moving. There's Benkei, Jekyll, Elizabeth Bathory, Boudica, Artoria, Fran, Lu Bu, Tesla, and even mysterious heroine X. Upon fighting Mephistopheles, his good side joins our cause. After essentially evicting all of the servants, we reach the building's roof, where all of the negative spirits have gathered into a greater ghost, Great Avicii Hell. Fortunately, Shiki can just about kill anything, including already deceased ghosts. With his plans ruined, Dantes refuses to properly introduce himself, instead leaping off the roof and vanishing from sight. Shiki suspects that he might just be the kind of villain who, upon defeat, may actually become a valuable ally. We already know that's exactly what happens. Although nothing changes in the story of this event, its rerun introduced another playable servant, Fujino Asagami. In Kara no Kyokai, Fujino came from a demon-hunting clan just like Shiki. Believing their powers to be obsolete in the modern age, Fujino's father tried to suppress her telekinesis, which caused her body to lose sensation. She grew unable to feel pain, until one day when a group of gangsters assaulted her. After being struck in the spine by a baseball bat, her senses returned to her, along with her mystic eyes of distortion. She sought revenge, believing her assailant stabbed her, when in truth, she had a fatal case of appendicitis. Fujino killed most of these gangsters, and as soon as she killed someone innocent, Shiki stepped in to slay her. Ultimately though, Fujino's pain went away again, and Shiki decided to instead kill her disease. Even though she's blind now, Fujino's mystic eyes are still powerful enough to tear apart an entire bridge, though she no longer has a reason to hurt people with them. As an archer servant for Chaldea though, she can put her tragic past behind her and instead help preserve humanity. The next event on our itinerary is Fate Accel Zero Order, FGO's collaboration with Fate Zero. I'm going to assume you have a working knowledge of Zero. If not, I've covered it and all of its participants in other videos. This event has Ritsuka and Mashu, guided by Waver Velvet, reenacting Fuyuki's Fourth Grail lore in the form of a singularity. Mind you, in FGO's story, there is no Fourth Grail War. Fuyuki's one and only Grail War was won by Marisbury Animosphere. That makes Fate Zero a separate timeline, one that only intersects with Chaldea through the bizarre circumstances of this singularity. Normally, the Fourth Grail War features Kiritsugu Emiya serving as the Ainsburn family's master. Once he discovers that the Greater Grail has been corrupted by Angra Mainyu, all the world's evils, he tries to prevent its awakening by having Artoria destroy it. The result is a massive fire in Fuyuki City, and while that kills a big chunk of innocent people, it's only a small fraction of the death toll that would come from a full awakening. This singularity follows a different path. Without Kiritsugu, Irisveal von Einsburn steps up as Artoria's genuine master. Surprisingly, this lets her dominate the war. At the same time, Kiritsugu winds up becoming a counter-guardian, just like Shiro, and is summoned by the counter-force to prevent Angra Mainyu's awakening. Tragically, this has him hunting down Irisveal, the Lesser Grail's vessel, who should be his wife in other timelines. Well, he was reluctantly willing to let her die to become the Grail in Zero, so it's not too surprising that he would now kill her to stop it. It's all a matter of what Kiritsugu perceives as the best way to save as many lives as possible. Perhaps due to the severity of this threat, Chaldea is able to detect and ray-shift to this alternate reality. Luckily, we have someone on our side who's very familiar with the Fourth Grail War, or at least how it's supposed to play out. In Zero, Waver Velvet was a clock tower mage who snuck off to Japan after stealing his teacher, Kenneth L. Malloy Archibald's catalyst. As the Master of Rider, aka Iskandar, King of Conquerors, he fought in the Fourth Grail War and emerged as one of its only survivors. Taking responsibility for Kenneth's death in the war, Waver agreed to take his place as a Clock Tower Lord, temporarily anyway. Thus, in his adulthood, he goes by the name Lord El Malloy II. He's only active in Fate Grand Order because of the heroic spirit Zhuge Liang, a masterful tactician during China's Three Kingdoms period. Rather than be summoned directly, Zhuge Liang opted to manifest as a pseudo-servant, using Waver's body and personality as his vessel. They're both compatible, since Waver was a genius in his own right. To clarify, Zhuge Liang's legend recorded in the Throne of Heroes specifically chose the Waver from Fate Zero's timeline as his vessel. Servants are just able to do that, pulling vessels from timelines other than the ones they're summoned to. Technically, that means Fate Grand Order's Waver has been summoned to protect a world he was never initially part of, even if there's a different Waver Velvet already alive. It's no different than Shiro and Archer Emiya meeting each other. Mind you, this only happens because their respective timelines are very similar to one another. Dr. Roman states that with the incineration of humanity, clusters of similar parallel worlds have, to an extent, become intertwined. Thus, knowing a thing or two about the Fourth Grail War, Waver offers to lead us through it. Just like in El Malloy case files, which we'll get to later, he's excited about the chance to meet Iskandar once more now that he's older. He wants Iskandar to be proud of him after having become his loyal subject in the past. Given that there are 7 servants in the war, and the Greater Grail starts activating when 5 of them have been defeated, Waver hopes that he can halt the ritual by convincing at least 3 servants to give up the battle. Hundred-Faced Hassan is not one of those 3, insisting to attack us throughout the event. The 3 that Waver hopes to persuade are Artoria, Diarmid, and Iskandar. Irisfeel and Saber are the easiest to recruit. When Kiritsugu, aka Assassin Emiya, attacks them, we protect Airi, gaining her trust. It takes a while before Waver is fully convinced that, in this singularity, Airi is Saber's true master, and not just a decoy. Kenneth and Lancer also prove to be easy to recruit. Waver pretends to be an ally, convincing Kenneth that in the future, his family creates Chaldea and sends help back in time for him to win this war. To prove his legitimacy, that he really is from the future, Waver threatens to recite one of Kenneth's love poems to his fiancée Sola-U. Piling on more lies, Waver persuades Kenneth to abandon the war, believing it to be a conspiracy set up by a rival faction of the Clock Tower to get Kenneth out of the picture. The gullible fool entrusts us with Diarmid while he rushes back to London. Iskandar, however, ironically becomes an enemy. Upon meeting, Servant Waver berates his younger self's naivete and inexperience. This pisses off Iskandar, who steps up to defend his master. In other words, Servant Waver's attempt to prove himself more mature and capable only incurs his king's wrath. It's not too surprising either, given that Iskandar respects young Waver's tenacity, his will to improve, and overcome his shortcomings. As such, even though both parties go to the sewers to kill Gilles de Rais and Ryunosuke, we don't wind up as a team. Unable to recruit Ryder, we instead hope to win over Karia and his berserker servant Lancelot. After discussing, he's willing to join us if we can help him slay Archer, aka Gilgamesh. Together we succeed, but the fight is so difficult that Karia winds up passing out. Berserker, without a master to control him, tries to attack Artoria, and while we try to fend him off, Iskandar comes to his aid to spite us. After Iskandar smacks some sense into him, Karia realizes that, instead of getting revenge on Tokiomi, his main goal is to rescue Sakura. In exchange for help doing so, Karia gives up the fight, allowing Iskandar to sever his hand and command spells. Ugh. Kiritsugu tries to attack Airi again, but this time, Waver suggests a method of ending this war without needing to kill her. Given that Kiritsugu inherits latent memories of loving Airi, he humors Waver's suggestion. They go to the Greater Grail's cave to destroy it before more servants can fill it. Iskandar, however, refuses to let us through, prioritizing a final bout with our Waver. Embracing this selfishness, Waver fights and actually beats the King of Conquerors. He tries to remain humble, admitting he only won due to Zhuge Liang's power. Iskandar, on the other hand, flicks him in the head and asserts that what matters is how he uses his power. After all, Iskandar's greatest asset, his Ionian Hetairoi, isn't his own power either. He relies on the aid of all of his soldiers. Despite growing up, our Waver still finds himself being mentored by Iskandar. Thus, when the king vanishes, Waver mourns his death, only to be struck by Lancelot from behind. You see, Zokin Mato discovered Karia's severed hand and claimed its command spells for himself. Taking over as Berserker's master, he opposes us in the cavern, shaming Irisveal for trying to end the ritual their families have been plotting for ages. We have no choice but to defeat Lancelot, and when we do, the Greater Grail gathers the 5 servants it needs to start activating. It takes the form of a black Irisveal, one which Zokin assumes is a reincarnation of Justice, the Einsburn homunculus at the Grail's core. He allows Black Irie to devour him, not caring that she's been tainted by Angraminyu. Our group needs Zhuge Liang to fight back, but Servant Waver can't move after being struck by Lancelot. To get around this, he chooses to entrust his younger self with Zhuge Liang's powers, even though young Waver is a bit of a timid bitch. While temporary, this transfer of power allows young Waver to join the others and defeat Black Irie. Now that the Grail has been destroyed, our Irie doesn't know how to proceed. She's betrayed the Einsburns and can no longer fulfill her role as the Grail's vessel. Thankfully, she agrees to join Chaldea instead. The two Wavers come to an understanding, with our Waver telling his younger self to study hard and become worthy of Zhuge Liang someday. Kiritsugu is relieved we were able to stop the ritual without sacrificing Irie. A guy like him typically thinks one can only save lives by taking others. That said, even though we destroyed the Grail, Kiritsugu knows we didn't fully destroy Angraminyu within it. After we all leave, Kiritsugu stays behind to face Angraminyu on his own. The results of this battle are unclear, but in the event's epilogue, Ritsuka and Mashu return to the Singularity and find Angraminyu still down in the cave. He's hanging out with a separate version of Irisveal, her Dress of Heaven form, the Grail's spirit of sorts. She's here because, apparently, we didn't fully destroy the Grail, and to finish the job, we've got to defeat her 4 distinct elemental versions. As far as I'm concerned, it's just added busy work. With that, the Singularity finally vanishes. The next event to cover is Prisma Causeway, otherwise known as Magical Girl Crew's Prisma Codes. This is, obviously, FGO's collaboration with Fate Collide liner Prisma Ilia, another spin-off story that focuses on Iliasveal von Einsburn becoming a magical girl. Prilia, as I'll call it, takes place in yet another alternate timeline where, during the Fourth War, Kiritsugu and Irisveal halt the Holy Grail Wars altogether. This lets Ilia grow up peacefully, not as a Grail vessel, but an ordinary 10-year-old girl. Nothing's ever that simple, though. When a number of mysterious class cards start appearing in Fuyuki, the Clock Tower sends Rein Tosaka and Luvia Edelfelt to collect them. The two girls come bearing Kaleido Sticks, 2 magical wands created by the renowned mage Zelrech. Since these girls refuse to cooperate, the Kaleido Sticks abandon them and find both Ilia and another girl named Miyu. These girls each form a contract with their respective wands, taking over their powers. This leaves Rein and Luvia mentoring Ilia and Miyu as they gather the class cards. Oh, and then there's Kuro, or Chloe Einsburn, a part of Ilia that was sealed off during the Fourth War, but manifests again using the Archer class card. At first, Kuro hates Ilia for living while she was suppressed, but after confronting Irisveal, they reconcile and team up going forward. The story gets more complex, but those are the basics that matter here. I've also got a whole lore of Prisma Ilia if you want to check that out. The Prisma Causeway event concerns the origin of all magical girls, something I guess Fate is taking a lot of creative liberty over. According to Fate, the very first magical girl was a demon who lived among humans and fought to save them. Let's call this girl the First Lady. She had a best friend, another prospective magical girl named Mila. Mila observed her friend's exploits and how her effort to bring happiness to everyone was futile. The First Lady wore herself out, all for the sake of greedy, unsatisfied humans. Hating to see this, Mila chose her friend over becoming a magical girl. Instead of helping the world, she became corrupt, using her magic for evil. Reluctantly, the First Lady chose to slay Mila, saving the world in the process. The area we visit in this event is actually a reality marble formed from the First Lady's regret. Within, she hopes to spread the love of magical girls, which in turn has attracted various echoes, or rather, the spirits of magical girls who failed in life. The collective despair of these echoes helps preserve First Lady's reality marble, but eventually, it reached maximum capacity. The First Lady needed to limit the echo population while searching for a source of mana that would help her expand her domain. To that end, the First Lady gave these echoes temporary bodies, tasking them to fight each other for survival. They established kingdoms and warred against themselves until only the strongest remained. Oddly enough, these girls, or their temporary bodies anyway, wound up being variations of heroes we've already met. There's Connacht Maeve, Nursery Rhyme, Medical Medea, and Mahatma Helena. Problem is, these echoes are still failed magical girls, and as such, aren't fully capable of granting the First Lady's wish. Without enough mana, First Lady can't grow her reality marble. Seeking a genuine or still active magical girl to siphon that mana from, First Lady targets the Prelia girls. Primarily focusing on Miu, First Lady also pulls Kuro and Elia into her reality marble. The event kicks off when Maeve, who is supposed to be serving the First Lady, instead rebels against her. In the chaos, Miu is imprisoned in the First Lady's castle, restrained by a mystic code that suppresses magical girls. Elia is able to escape, but Kuro, hoping Reines and Luvia will come rescue them, remains hidden. Eventually, however, the First Lady convinces Kuro that Elia only sees her as an inferior accessory. To vent her frustration, Kuro allows the First Lady to use her body as a vessel in exchange for the chance to duel Elia. Lastly, while attempting to recruit more magical girls into her army, Maeve opens a ley line to Chaldea, accidentally summoning Ritsuka and Mashu. I guess this reality marble assumes that Mashu is a magical girl, or can at least become one. It treats Ritsuka then as her familiar. We find both Kaleido Ruby and Elia trying to fend off Maeve after refusing to join her army. At first, Ruby thinks Mashu has installed a class card, but quickly realizes none of them are able to do that here. We all team up to go rescue Miu. This has us visiting each of the 4 magical girl kingdoms: Nursery Rhyme's Land of Sweets, Medea's Land of Dragons and Sea, Helena's Land of Dead Bookshelves, and Maeve's Land of Snow and Honey. Each of these queens has a jewel that allows them to stay alive. To infiltrate the First Lady's castle, we'll need to gather all of these jewels. First, Nursery Rhyme gives us her jewel after we play with her friend, which is hilariously the demon god pillar Glacia Labolas. Next, we receive Medea's jewel because her familiar, Mini Jason, doesn't want her to become a witch. At this point, Elia's sick of the other magical girls dying, so she instead convinces Helena to come along with us. Helena confirms that here, Mashu is a magical girl, the dangerous beast-type Squishy Mashu, which is rather embarrassing. The remaining queen, Maeve, is the strongest of the magical girls. Her minions not only attack us, but also Chaldea through the ley line. Romani insists we abandon the reality marble, but Ritsuka and Mashu insist on seeing things through. At times, without a direct connection to Chaldea, Mashu runs low on mana, and Ruby convinces her to kiss Ritsuka for more. Too bad their connection gets re-established, and Roman cock-blocks this wonderful opportunity. Although Miu is captured, unable to free herself from the ribbons that bind her, her wand, Sapphire, is able to escape and find us. Temporarily, Sapphire forms a contract with Mashu, allowing her to fight off Maeve's familiar, Mini Ku Hullen. We are convinced that the First Lady is cruel for using the hopes and dreams of Echoes to fulfill her wish. Maeve then is just as bad for trying to usurp power and do the very same thing. Even so, Ritsuka insists that Maeve is trying to fight despair in her own way. Her army is meant to be a place for fallen magical girls to take refuge. Although Maeve wants to deny this, her true feelings flow forth in the wake of combat. Heartbroken, her castle falls apart, and she entrusts us with her jewel. Mashu wants her to join us, but Ku says it's best to let Maeve die with pride, as penance for meddling in other worlds. With all 4 jewels in hand, the black wall surrounding the First Lady's fortress disappears. A swarm of enemies block our path, and Elena chooses to stay behind and fend them off. Her familiar happens to be a miniature Edison. We reach the First Lady's throne room to find Miyu bound by ribbons and Kuro wanting to pick a fight with Ilya. After they have a duel, the First Lady takes over Kuro's body, revealing the true nature of her plan. Using Miyu's mana, the First Lady aims to convert the echoes into genuine magical girls, sending them to the real world to save everyone. She calls this process Prisma Codes. Not willing to sacrifice Kuro or Miyu, we join Ilya in opposing the First Lady. During our fight, it becomes clear that the First Lady's insane plan is mainly her trying to cope with killing her friend Mila, whom she can never see again. She's proven wrong though. Mila just so happens to be one of the echoes guided to the reality marble. With the barrier gone, Mila possesses Ilya and slaps the First Lady. She takes this chance to explain why she became a corrupted magical girl in the first place, and even now, she just wants to bring peace to her best friend's suffering heart. Having reconciled, Mila and the First Lady disappear, choosing to entrust the future of magical girls to people like Ilya, Kuro, and Miyu. Elena then inherits the reality marble, offering to preserve it as a safe haven for fallen magical girls, even though it's unstable and won't last forever. Using the jewels, 5 in all including the First Ladies, Ritsuka, Ilya, Mashu, and Miyu wish to go home, returning to their respective worlds. Surprisingly, Kuro emerges in Chaldea, offering to help out as a servant. Through the gacha and its rerun, both Ilya and Miyu can also be summoned as servants. I didn't mention it earlier, but Miyu is an interesting case. Even within Prisma Ilya, she came from an alternate world the class cards originate from. Fans like to call this place the Miyu-verse. There, she was born as Miyu Sakatsuki, her world's holy grail vessel. She could be used as a sacrifice to grant the wish of the war's winner, and to prevent this, her world's version of Shiro Emiya fought his way to her against the Ainsworth family. He then wished to grant Miyu's happiness, sending her to a place where she can be an ordinary girl and make friends. That world happens to be where she meets Ilya. Having no place to go, she's adopted by Luvia as one of the Edelfelts. Now, as if this event weren't weird enough, it has an epilogue where a bunch of Chaldea's male servants get envious of the magical girls and visit the reality marble to become magical gentlemen. In theory, there would be nothing wrong with this, but between Blackbeard, Gilles de Rais, the Phantom of the Opera, and Diarmuid, they all prove to be unfit for the role, prompting us to kick their asses. In the aftermath, we get called to the land of crystals and stars, the demon realm from which the First Lady was born. A shadowy figure calling herself Testament says the magical gentleman wished upon her as the ideal magical girl. Just like them, though, their wish was corrupt, and to prevent their impure desires from spreading, we need to defeat her too. It's very silly. Next up, we've got the Apocrypha collaboration, Inheritance of Glory. As a general overview, Fate Apocrypha is another spin-off timeline where the Third Holy Grail War went very differently. The Greater Grail was stolen, modified so that the next Grail War, the Great Grail War, would have a total of 15 servants. First, 2 teams of 7 servants, the red and black factions would duke it out, and then the winning faction would fight amongst themselves to decide a winner. Supervising the entire thing is a ruler-class servant, who in this case happens to be Jeanne d'Arc. Clock Tower mages comprise the red faction, while Darnik Preston Yiga de Millennia's extended family comprises the black faction. Apocrypha's protagonist is a poor homunculus the black faction uses to generate mana for their servants. He winds up escaping the facility and inherits the heart of Siegfried, allowing him to survive and participate in the war to liberate his fellow homunculi. He calls himself Sieg in honor of Siegfried's sacrifice. Ultimately, he is cursed to become the reincarnation of the dragon Fafnir, and accepting this fate, he escorts the Greater Grail to the reverse side of the world, where it can no longer interfere with the rest of the planet. Darnik died in the war after fusing with Vlad III, becoming a horrific Dracula. He was absorbed into the Greater Grail like all the other fallen participants. Years after his demise, Darnik's will still lingers within the Grail. His yearning to acquire the Grail once more causes him to imagine further wars that take place within the Grail. In his desperation, Darnik continues to dream up more complex Grail wars, thousands of them, each getting more brutal than the last. If left unchecked, the Greater Grail will go out of control, threatening to tear apart the world's texture. Thus, Sieg, aka Fafnir, seeks help trying to put an end to Darnik's ambition. Ritzka, then, is called to the Greater Grail of Apocrypha's world through a dream. To that end, Ritzka is summoned to a recreation of the Great Grail War held in Trefus. Everything from the war Sieg participated in has been meticulously recreated, from the location to participating servants. That said, it's a bizarre permutation of the war where the continuity of events is very different. All of the servants are mere imitations of the war's original participants. They generally lack emotions and a will of their own, fighting endlessly when they emerge each night. Prior to summoning Ritzka, Fafnir was able to turn 2 of these servants into their proper forms. Thus, Cheiron and Achilles are the only servants from the main 14 to regain their sense of reason. They are on our side, but unfortunately, the other servants get to us first. Fafnir is struck by Balmung, Siegfried's noble phantasm, and crashes into the forest. While Cheiron and Achilles escort us to the safety of a fortress, it appears Fafnir has been severely weakened by the attack. To continue on, the dragon creates a terminal of itself. His inner avatar is Sieg. Sieg joins us while his dragon body goes to sleep. Our goal is to win this war, but with only Cheiron and Achilles on our team, it's not going to be easy. Luckily, Sieg has a working knowledge of all 14 servants and their true names. Our plan to win this war is to divide and conquer. Achilles and Cheiron are tasked with defeating 9 servants, while Ritzka and Sieg will defeat the remaining 3. Using a bounded field, Cheiron separates these servants from each other. On Ritzka's side of things, we face a Visebron, Shakespeare, and Jack the Ripper. Because it's Sieg who slays them, these 3 are revived as proper servants, joining our team. Of course, that doesn't mean we all get along. Most of these guys were enemies during the original war, but new circumstances forced them to work together. For instance, Sieg is hesitant around Jack, feeling guilty that in Apocrypha, he was unable to save her despite her tragic past. The following night, we isolate and defeat Spartacus, Atalante, and Frankenstein's monster, or Fran. Now, we might be conjuring the proper version of these servants whenever Sieg defeats them, but that doesn't stop their mindless doppelgangers from reappearing each night. For instance, even though we have Shakespeare on our side, the imitation Shakespeare will still come back to attack us. At the very least, our own fighting force is getting stronger. As usual though, our newly recruited servants are a handful. Lacking their memories from the original war, they need to meet each other all over again, which comes with disagreements. Spartacus randomly declares Fafnir to be an oppressor, and Fran gets pissed Fafnir sleeps on her flowers. By day, we have to reel in these misfit servants, and by night, fight to recruit more. Our next recruits are Mordred, Siegfried, and Astolfo. Luckily, they're more amicable. Despite being foes in the original war, Mordred and Fran really get along here. As this simulated war continues, Sieg notices his control of the Grail getting weaker and weaker. Reasoning we finally have enough recruits on our side, 11 of the total 14, we shift our focus from fighting the imitation servants to assaulting the war's biggest set piece, Semiramis' Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The remaining 3 servants, Vlad, Karna, and Semiramis, must be there. Our servants all devise different ways of getting up to the gardens, since many of them can't just fly like Astolfo or Achilles. Before the battle, Sieg questions the outcome of Fate Apocrypha. He wonders if him claiming the Grail was really for the best, as it meant denying the wishes of other participants. Ritzka invites him to Chaldea, but he declines, vowing to watch over the Grail while he waits to reunite with someone. We know that Sieg is referring to Jean. This event must occur before Apocrypha's epilogue, where Jean finally finds a way to be with him. On their way to the gardens, Karna intercepts the party, but is knocked away when Fran and Mordred launch themselves into the air with an amplified mana burst. Inside, Semiramis comes to greet us. I'm pretty sure this is her first appearance in this series of mine. In life, she was known as history's first poisoner. Born from the Syrian mermaid goddess Derketo, Semiramis was abandoned and cared for by doves. She grew up to be so beautiful that the Syrian king Reines fell in love with her. Beyond her beauty, Semiramis proved herself to be a brilliant tactician, and as soon as she married the king, she poisoned him and ruled as Assyria's wise queen for decades. For the Great Grail War in Trephus, she was summoned as an assassin with additional caster abilities. Truthfully, Semiramis never commissioned the Hanging Gardens, but legends falsely attributed them to her. Nifty. Originally, she partnered with Shiro Amakusa Tokisada, having fallen in love with him. Here, she's been reduced to another pawn in Darnik's imitation Grail Wars. Like the other servants, we defeat her in Karna, allowing them to emerge with their sanity thanks to Sieg's presence. With Semiramis on our side, she points out that Darnik is our true enemy. At the Greater Grail's chamber, Darnik brags that he now has 87% of the Grail under his control. He tries to bribe our servants with the chance to reincarnate as humans again, but they all refuse. In response, Darnik connects to the Grail within his imitation war, using it to summon a crap ton of imitation servants. By working together, though, all of Apocrypha's servants are able to destroy the pseudo-Grail. Darnik himself is defeated when suddenly struck by Kazikli Bey, the noble phantasm of Vlad III. After so many iterations of this war, it's no surprise that Vlad would eventually manifest. This puts an end to the simulation. Similar to a singularity, all of the servants disappear, leaving Ritska and Fafnir in the reverse side of the world. As thanks for resolving this issue, Fafnir gifts us his terminal, Sieg, as a Chaldean servant. This Sieg will eventually become its own individual person, while Apocrypha's Sieg, as Fafnir, will wait however long it takes to meet with Jean once more. Okay. Our second to last event is Lady Reines Case Files, a collaboration with the Lord El Malloy II Case Files light novels. As we saw with the Accel Zero event, Waver returned from the Fourth Grail War in Fuyuki and inherited the title of Lord El Malloy. This was because Cainith's death left the El Malloy family in shambles. Its next heir, Reines El Malloy Archisort, was too young to inherit the title of Lord, and so she coerced Waver into holding that title as a temporary placeholder. To that end, she supported Waver as he became a talented instructor at the Clock Tower. The two of them keep getting dragged into various supernatural mysteries. So far, I've made lore videos for every translated volume of El Malloy Case Files, so there's a lot for you to check out if you're interested. A central character in Case Files is Grey, Waver's disciple and bodyguard. She grew up in the village surrounding Blackmoor Cemetery, which was long ago entrusted with reviving King Arthur. Grey was one of the cemetery's gravekeepers, which was ironic given her fear of spirits. As a descendant of Arthur, it was her duty to serve as Artoria's reincarnated body. Thus, around the same time as the Fourth Grail War, her face and body literally shaped themselves to be the king's spitting image. She feels this robbed her of her own identity, and thus conceals her face behind a hood. Her only friend growing up was Ad, a mystic code created by Morgan Le Fay to seal the power of King Arthur's lance, Rungo-Minyad. Ad's personality is based on Sir Kay of the Round Table, who was a snarky smartass. Eventually, the villagers aimed to sacrifice Grey by severing her mind and soul from her body, but Waver rescued her from that fate, taking her back to London to be his bodyguard. This event occurs when Chaldea is transitioning from the Shadow Border to its new home at the Wandering Sea. Da Vinci once created a device, Mnemosyne, which was meant to verify a master's existence post-ray shift in an emergency. It was never used due to technical issues, but winds up activating during our move. When it does, it learns all about the trauma Ritska's been going through fighting the alien god and the cryptors. There's also the guilt of putting to death everyone in the Lost Belts. To liberate Ritska from that mental burden, Mnemosyne aims to become their only observer, essentially taking over that burden in their place. To pull this off, Mnemosyne interfaces with the Holy Grail and uses it to create a new singularity based on 19th century London. It's a bizarre patchwork London, scattered with scraps of everyone's memories. By first wiping Ritska's memories, then having them seek out these scraps, Mnemosyne hoped to gather mana and replace Ritska's memories with false ones. Mnemosyne itself hides in the singularity as a copy of Rungo-Minyad disguised as the Clock Tower. Our pal Waver finds this singularity mighty suspicious and tries to investigate it. However, as a servant, he senses Mnemosyne can detect him. To avoid its detection, he splits his Saint Graph into two parts. He allows one part, the one containing his power as Zhuge Liang, to be murdered, tricking Mnemosyne into thinking he's dead, when in truth, his other half is still around trying to solve the mystery. Before doing that, he activated his noble phantasm, Chu Shibiao, to call for help. This resulted in the summoning of Reines, Luvia, and Gray as servants. Luvia Jelita Edelfelt is one of Waver's students at the Clock Tower. She's a lavish mage whose arrogance matches her talent. Because they both use jewel magecraft, she and Rin Tosaka are hopeless rivals. In FGO, she appears as a pseudo-servant, the human vessel for Astrea, the Greek goddess of justice. For more details, see my Atlantis lore. Reines, however, takes after Waver, becoming the vessel for Sima Yi, a general during China's Three Kingdoms era. Technically, as Emperor Xuan, he was the de facto victor of the Three Kingdoms era. Finding it best to use a modern persona for modern issues, Sima Yi entrusts control to Reines, as she's experienced with London and the Clock Tower's inner workings. Even though Reines is too young to step up as a lord, she's a talented mage. Perhaps her greatest achievement is modifying Kaneth's mystic code, the Mercury Golem Volume in Hydrargyrum, into her own personal transforming maid, Trimao. She, Luvia, and Gray all eventually wind up helping Ritsuka uncover the mystery behind this singularity. The event starts off with Ritsuka waking up on a train with Reines. Both of them have had their memories tampered. Reines, in particular, believes herself to be Lord Elmaloy II, convinced that Ritsuka is her pupil. As such, we explore London together. Upon reaching Reines's, or rather Waver's flat, we find Waver's dead body, triggering Reines's memory of him. Our main clue to solving the mystery of Waver's death is the letter M written in blood. While investigating this, we run into other servants who also had their memories tampered with. By request, we help Jack, Kintoki, and Paul Bunyan search Patchwork London's library for their missing friend, who winds up being Nursery Rhyme. Inside, we discover a scrap of paper with the name Mnemosyne written on it. While it's silent, the word Mnemosyne starts with the letter M. Finding this clue restores a bit of Ritsuka and Reines's memories, or at least that's how it seems. Thus, we make it our goal to visit the other Patchworks to retrieve their scraps. Our next destination is a masquerade ball, where the Tower of London, which they call the Bloody Tower, looms with a strong mana signal. There, James Moriarty, introduced simply as M, insists we all put on masks for the ball. M, Shakespeare, and their queen, Artoria, are searching for their missing pianist, and they hire us to find him. Upon discovering another paper scrap, Reines is able to piece together that they created an automaton to imitate Antonio Salieri as their pianist, only to then forget they did so. Going without maintenance, this automaton went berserk and had to be destroyed. With that settled, our search for the truth is interrupted by Luvia and assassin Kiritsugu, whom she calls Carrie. They don't want us collecting the paper scraps. Rather, Luvia wants them to restore her own memories, forcing us to compete. Mistaking Reines for Lord Elmaloy, Luvia sicks a group of automata on us, but they're quickly destroyed by Gray. Apparently, ever since being summoned, Gray's been searching for Reines, and just now finds her. With Gray's help, we escape the ball with another Mnemosyne scrap. This restores another memory for Ritsuka, the time we fought against the Lion King in Camelot. Ritsuka wakes up in a hotel within the Third Patchwork, a steampunk-themed area ruled by the Steam King Charles Babbage. In Babbage's throne room, he admits this patchwork is an unnatural realization of his dream. Paradoxically, an ideal world powered by steam is a dream Babbage was never able to realize. That's exactly why he exists as a heroic spirit. For this steampunk kingdom to exist alongside him proves that it isn't real. Thus, he feels a responsibility to end it. Babbage assumes this patchwork shard is inside his own body, but none of us want to kill him to obtain it. Instead, we assume Babbage's memory is flawed like the other servants and search his kingdom for another solution. A hidden doorway leads our search to a giant machine, the Difference Engine, that absorbs the land's ghosts. Reines has Trimao analyze this device, leading her to believe it used to be powered by a scrap, but someone's already taken it. To compensate for its mana shortage, the Difference Engine gathers ghosts and sent automata after the thief. The moment Reines suspects that Waver might be that thief, we rush back to his flat. Unfortunately, that apartment building is now on fire, with both ghosts and automata swarming it. Luvia fights her way through, hoping to claim the scrap before we do. Gray prepares her noble phantasm, the unsealed Rongominiad, to stop her, forcing us to protect her from Kiritsugu. We weren't able to match Estrella's might before, but now, Gray is able to stop her. Reaching the flat first, Ritsuka touches the scrap, only to realize that this entire time, we've been erasing our memories of Da Vinci. This is exactly what Mnemosyne wants. Her voice urges Ritsuka to accept it, but then, the still-living part of Waver shows up to announce that these scraps are a trap to tamper with Ritsuka's memories. Waver also clarifies that his dying message, the letter M, wasn't referring to Moriarty, but rather Mashu. All along, Mashu has been the only one at Chaldea Ritsuka could contact. Finding that suspicious, Waver suspects that the Mashu we've been communicating with is an imposter. No longer wanting the scraps, Luvia teams up with us to seek out the true mastermind behind this singularity. Upon closer inspection, Reines figures out that the clock tower is actually a fake Rongominiad. Revealing itself to all, the Lance fights back by sending out more ghosts and automata. Gray notes that if she had enough mana, she could blast our way in, so we set out to find even more paper scraps. Babbage is able to convert them into mana without letting them corrupt Ritsuka's memories. In doing so, we confront fake versions of our adventures so far. There's a false fight between Medea, Heracles, and Jason, an expectedly silly take on the Saber Wars, a false battle against Gawain at Camelot's Gate, and an alternate Babylonia where Benkei gets corrupted by Tiamat instead of Ushi Wakamatsu. With all of the scraps, Gray uses her noble phantasm to create an opening in the false lance, along with a crystal stairway to reach it. Countering our advance, Mnemosyne forces Ritsuka to revisit our battle against Gaetia, pitting us against a series of battles with the demon god pillars. Eventually, though, we finally reach the lance's interior. There, Mnemosyne appears as Da Vinci with a strange helmet on. She confesses her intent to free Ritsuka from their traumatic past so we can go on fighting without burden. It becomes clear, however, that Mnemosyne is mostly projecting her own inadequacies. Her earliest memories of Da Vinci, her creator, happily consulting Dr. Roman. When Chaldea transferred to the Wandering Sea, Mnemosyne learned of Da Vinci's death and felt powerless to save her. The false memories she wants to instill within Ritsuka are those without Da Vinci. Through this whole singularity, she hoped to have Ritsuka accept these false memories willingly, but now tries to force them on us. To fight back, Estrella uses her noble phantasm, Iam Reddit e Virgo, to clear away the smog surrounding London, weakening Mnemosyne's connection to the lands. We win, causing Mnemosyne to release all of her collected memories as her fake lance collapses. As she deactivates, she imagines being praised for her work by Da Vinci. She had good intentions, but ultimately took a dark turn. That's why the event's rerun adds an extra chapter, a fictitious return, which features a fragment of Mnemosyne that opposes this plan to rewrite Ritsuka's memories. In that opposition, the fragment manifests within a servant, Faker, or as we often call her, Hephaestion. Iskandar, or Alexander the Great, had a lot of help conquering the land as he did. His mother, Olympias, arranged the birth of twins who would loyally serve under him as king. One of these twins, Hephaestion, was a man who went on to be one of Iskandar's most loyal soldiers. Hephaestion's sister, however, was never given a name of her own. She was tasked with defending her king from curses. To that end, she was trained to become a priestess of Dionysus, attending the same school as Iskandar and his future generals. Put bluntly, she was raised as Iskandar's magical body double. Without a name of her own, she could easily use magecraft to impersonate the king and her own brother. The idea was for any curses sent Iskandar's way to instead be absorbed by her. She gave her life for the king, refusing to receive her own identity. She also resents Iskandar's army for letting him perish, which is why she doesn't heed the call of his Ionian Hetairoi. We call her Faker because she was summoned in El Malloy case files under that title. In this event, she is summoned under the more official Pretender class due to Mnemosyne's influence. I guess that also means she has slightly different abilities in FGO than in case files. Regardless, as Iskandar's shadow, she rides his chariot, Gordius Wheel, though her version, Hecate Wheel, is pulled by bone dragons rather than the king's divine bulls. In this singularity, Faker is tasked with protecting a physical embodiment of Ritska's memories while on board the Rail Zeppelin, a train that travels Europe auctioning off different mystic eyes. Stuck within the train, they need to find a way for Ritska's memories to return back to the main body, else they'll vanish. Oddly enough, Faker remembers her time being summoned by Dr. Heartless in El Malloy case files. She tells stories to Ritska about her past as they fight through the train. Further in, they meet the train's conductor, Rodin, who explains that Rail Zeppelin was able to emerge in Patchwork London due to his deputy manager forming a causal link between them. Put simply, this manager is a shadow of Rita Rose N, a high-ranking dead apostle. Even outside the singularity, the Rail Zeppelin was able to avoid being bleached by the alien god by running through the underworld. Eventually, the train arrives at Mnemosyne's fake Rongominiad while she dreams of Da Vinci's praise. Turns out, Rodin came all the way here to retrieve some mystic eyes that Marisbury Animisphere won at one of their auctions. These eyes are what allow Mnemosyne to observe Chaldean masters, but now that she doesn't need them, Rail Zeppelin wants them back. As for these Ritska memories, they're just a copy, and now that Ritska's body has already gone back to Chaldea, there's no real need for them to reunite. Regardless, Faker insists on keeping these memories alive, if only to preserve the memory of their time together. Thus, we try to leave on the Rail Zeppelin, only for Mnemosyne's fake Rongominiad to start fighting back. Turns out, it's an imperfect recreation, one without the seals meant to limit its power. Charged with an entire Holy Grail and the lingering mana in this singularity, it attacks us as Nega Rongominiad. The train can fight back, using its giant energy cannon, the Mystic Eye Projector, but it's still not enough to thwart the rampaging lands. In the end, Ritska's memories and Faker are knocked off the train and surrounded by ghosts and automata. To help these memories escape, Faker sacrifices herself, using the full might of her spirit origin to conjure the Ionian Hetairoi. In the process, Faker gets to speak with Iskandar about his death, which pacifies her anger to an extent. This pays off, with Ritska proper waking up in Chaldea with the memories of being with Faker. Thanks to this, Ritska can summon Faker as a proper Chaldean servant. Our last event to cover is Fate Requiem, Board Games of the Apocalypse. Just like Case Files, Fate Requiem is another ongoing light novel series. Its story is set in the event where, instead of the Fifth Grail War in Fuyuki being the last, a series of Grail Wars are performed in public, leading to World War III. This war annihilates most of the planet. Its de facto winner, Chitose Manazuru, uses the Grail to recreate parts of Tokyo, such as Akihabara, into a place called Mosaic City, humanity's last bastion of hope. People born into Mosaic City do so with a Holy Grail in their heart, making them all masters. Whether they like it or not, they get paired with servants the Grail deems them most compatible with. None of the war's survivors die from old age or sickness, so instead they try to live peacefully with their respective servants. Requiem's protagonist is Eris Utsumi. Initially growing up without a servant, she eventually forms a contract with Voyager, the very last servant summoned to her world. Unlike most humans, Eris is the daughter of a master and a servant, the only one of her kind as far as I'm aware. Her mom was the underworld goddess Izanami, and as such, her body is inhabited by evil dread spirits. To prevent these spirits from tearing her apart, Eris must sate them through killing. To that end, she is known as the Grim Reaper, and works by slaying servants who break society's rules. Her boss is an AI named Karen Fujimura, who looks quite a bit like Karen Hortensia. As a member of Mosaic City's Night Watch, she controls the dread spirits as a black sludge she calls Demon King Errol Koenig. When she was a child, Eris met a master contracted to Louis XVI, the second son of Marie Antoinette. Eris befriended Louis, knowing that in life he was imprisoned and killed during the French Revolution. She hoped that he and his master could live happily within Mosaic City, but that hope was shattered when his master wound up being a deranged serial killer. In self-defense, Eris killed the master, causing Louis to fade away while calling for his mother. Eris's servant is, as his name implies, the Voyager 1 space probe sent into space in 1977 with the Titan IIIe rocket. More specifically, he is an embodiment of people's dream of exploring space, taking the form of a celestial angel of sorts. He winds up being perfect for Eris, given she feels it's a waste that humans no longer yearn for the stars. His appearance is even influenced by Eris's love of the book The Little Prince. With his summoning, servants stop appearing for new children. They also stop respawning when defeated. Eris met him before command spells ever appeared on her. Now that they're a team, though, they participate in Chitose's Holy Grail War tournament, which will effectively end the world as they know it. Eris profoundly respects heroic spirits, and deep down, wishes she could become one. At the same time, she feels she would be a disgrace to heroic spirits, complicating her desire. This event occurs when Eris's Holy Grail tries to grant her wish. She's turned into a special kind of heroic spirit, a quasi-servant. Rather than a copy from the Throne of Heroes, the fact that she's the child of a servant allows her genuine self to become one. Her command spells transform into Monde de Jeu, a small recreation of Mosaic City for her to inhabit. It appears as a sea of stars with 5 interconnected cities, each playing host to a game that needs to be won before a tram takes guests to the next city. She doesn't realize it, but these games serve as a way for Eris to overcome her troubled past and prove herself worthy as a heroic spirit. The epitome of her shame comes from having killed Louis XVI. Her guilt takes on the form of a punishing figure, a black Marie Antoinette that plagues Monde de Jeu. This process also severed Eris's contract with Voyager. He saw how Black Marie, pretending to be the real Marie, was secretly trying to lure Eris in and drown her in despair. Seeking help, Voyager disguised the Grail and Monde de Jeu as a game board that found its way to Chaldea. Ritska and the other servants who find this game are pulled inside, forced to participate as players. Eris is blindsided by all of this. Unaware that this world is her wish made manifest, she instead thinks that Chaldea has stolen Voyager from her. Viewing Ritska as someone who abuses their servants, she acts as our rival throughout the games, not realizing that she herself is a servant. On several occasions, she fights us using Ame no Sakahoko, a replica of Ame no Nuboko, the spear Izanami used to raise land from the primordial sea in Shintoism. The first game is a parody of Monopoly. The second has players take the role of villagers, some of whom turn into werewolves. It's a complicated game that sets villagers against the werewolves, but to win, they need to anticipate which among them even are werewolves. Eris winds up destroying the third game before we even get a chance to play it. The tram gets broken too, forcing us to find a different way to the fourth city. There, we face Eris in a game called Orbat Clash, a strategy game where players command armies and fight for 9 flags. To clarify, you don't necessarily have to beat Eris in these games to continue the story, as it has different scenarios occurring based on the outcome. The fifth game is a race to a shrine atop a haunted mountain, where movement is dictated by dice roll. At the mountain's peak is Kijo Koyo, an Oni servant from the Japanese tale Momiji Gari. In it, Koyo was thought to be a gift from Mara, demon king of the sixth heaven, to a couple who could not bear their own child. She had an affinity for witchcraft and was banished to Mount Togakushi. She and her follower opposed the imperial court, causing Taira no Koremochi to scale the mountain and slay her with a spiritual demon-slaying sword. Oddly enough, Koyo appears as a dinosaur, based on a dragon god on the mountain that was likely just a dinosaur fossil. Despite this intimidating form, Koyo is usually sweet and gentle. In Requiem, she is the servant of Eris's friend Karin. She goes on to befriend Voyager as well, feeling a duty to protect youths from being hurt. In this event, Koyo has been trapped on the mountain by Black Marie, alongside the real Marie from Chaldea. At first, Eris doesn't recognize Koyo, only knowing of her dinosaur form, but the two bond over both knowing Karin. Just as they start to get along, Black Marie provokes Koyo's rage, forcing her to attack us. When the real Marie is discovered, it exposes Black Marie, and we defend Eris against her. Black Marie escapes on a tram leading to the night sky, and we chase after her. Eris, on the other hand, finally realizes she's a servant, and with the real Marie's blessing, she decides to join Chaldea to prevent Mondejou from being corrupted further. The final battleground happens to be Shinjuku. Together, Eris and Ritsuka's party confront and defeat the Black Marie. This involves Eris admitting that Black Marie is a manifestation of her guilt. Rather than being absorbed by the darkness, however, Eris fights against it. In the aftermath, Voyager returns the game board to Chaldea, freeing all of its participants. Eris chooses to become a Chaldean servant, entrusting her grail to us. She stays behind as Voyager and Kijo Koyo set off on another journey. What the hell does that even mean? Kinda reminds me of the journey that Abigail goes on at the end of Salem. Whatever, they can both be pulled in the gotcha anyway. Holy shit, I just packed 6 completely different events into a single video. This was exhausting to say the least. If you enjoyed it though, please like, comment, and share the video around so it pays off in the algorithm. Even though I've covered these type moon works in their own videos, there was quite a lot to learn from seeing how they interact with Fate Grand Order. I hope you found this enlightening, and I'll see you later for more lore, certainly come time for Lost Belt 7, if not earlier. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all our anime lore, discussions, and Let's Play content.
you can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or a YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like spicy exclusive vids and early access.
As always, celebrate your fandom. I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters: VideoGamer75, Dante Pendragon, WurgGX, Stephen Elak, The Nonchalant Ostrich, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Free Brick, Olympian Doll, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Lunar Works, Link Pendrago, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Zamas Autonomous, Yuki Eidos, Crow Kalem, Scout, Saul Soto, Tristan Riggin, Mayfu Mado, Caitlin P, Sogai CH, Vladimir Ovna, The Taz 96, Jonathan Padua, Kengo X77, Hersha of E-Rated Hands, Alistair Bernadotte, and Akakaze Yume. Thank you all so much.